Hello, everybody. My name is Kelly Higgins, and I am the Executive Director for the Autism Community Connection. ACC is a local nonprofit here in Johnson County. We serve individuals and families affected by autism. As Josh and I were just talking about, we have several events coming up. We have our trivia night, which is next month, September 14th. And then we have our trunk or treat coming up on October 19th. You can go to our website to get more information. Today, we're doing a webinar with Joshua with the Positive Behavior Support Corporation. He's going to talk to us about how to manage some, behaviors that you kind of see at home. Josh, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Well, I'll start out by just giving a little bit of background about myself. I have been in ABA for about 12 years now. I started off as a music teacher, and I transitioned into special ed about 2010, and then I became a BCBA shortly thereafter. And I have a big passion for ABA and getting kids the services that they need. And I've been around the country with PBS doing this work. And I always just get really rewarded when I see, providers and families getting connected and kiddos making progress, individuals making progress. So, okay. So we're going to talk today about managing challenging behaviors in the community. I added a couple of technology elements that you'll see in a little bit, just to make it a little easier for you to facilitate some of these technologies, some of these strategies, but you'll see that here in a few minutes. Okay, so here are objectives for tonight. We're going to just learn about ABA in general, which some of you might already know. What is PBS as a science? What is PBS Corp? And we're going to talk about the technologies for parents. So what is ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis? Basically, ABA is the scientific approach to learning and behavior. So I just really just call it the science of behavior. So the science of learning. So we take behaviors, we analyze them, we see why our behaviors happening, and how we can adjust the antecedents and consequences to make them occur more or make them occur less. And we do this to increase socially significant and appropriate behaviors and decrease any problematic or disruptive behaviors that individuals might have. And we hope to achieve meaningful outcomes and ultimately improve the quality of life of the individuals we serve. So the benefits of ABA, we just talked about this, but increasing communication, receptive, so understanding directions, following basic directions, following advanced four-part moving directions, manding, which is requesting. So requesting items if a child's not able to request, we'll work with them on how to improve their speech or use the device or use picture exchange cards, those types of things, all the way up till really complex communication using conversation skills and other social skills. Speaking of social skills, we target social skills like how to say please and thanks, to how to go on a date, or what would that look like, and using what's called behavioral skills training to work with those individuals that need those social skills to make sure that they can acquire them and then transition and generalize them to the actual places where they're going to be using them. We increase attention. So PBS is, or ABA is not only used for kids with autism. We also treat kids with ADHD and Down syndrome and other disabilities. Unfortunately, insurance doesn't cover some of those other disabilities, but we manipulate those antecedents, the things that come before behaviors, and the consequences that come after behaviors in order to increase attending to tasks, attending to homework, attending to chores, etc. Community participation. So if individuals are not too keen on going out in the environment, no, excuse me, not in the environment, in their community, then we will work on systems in order to make sure that they can participate at their fullest ability. And then we also increase parent support. So we're here to ensure that you have the skills as parents to improve your abilities to manage challenging behaviors and prevent those challenging behaviors from occurring, and also to teach your children the skills that they need. We also decrease challenging behaviors, like I said, and we also make sure that we decrease your children or the folks that you're servicing. We want to make sure we decrease their reliance on you so that they can be more independent and access community services and actually be a functioning part of their community to the fullest extent. ABA is not. Oftentimes we get a bad label using a technique called discrete trial training. And some folks think that's all we do. It's just like every day we do the same exact thing over and over again. That's not what we do. It's there's parts of that we do use. We do use a repetition in order to ensure that folks are learning. But we don't teach folks to use robotic language. ABA is not just one strategy, it's a plethora of strategies that we use in order to target these behaviors and increase skills. It's not new. We've had this science around for a long time, but insurance has recently started covering it within the last 10 years, but it's not something that's brand new to science. It's not the same for everyone. So every child's behavior intervention plan and skill acquisition plan should look different. We're not going to use cookie cutter programs. Well, we shouldn't be using cookie cutter programs for every single child. Bribery is not something that we use. Lots of people think that because we use positive reinforcement for behaviors that occur, or excuse me, for skills that children are learning, they equate that with bribery. Bribery is offering something in order to for someone to obtain an outcome that's not great. So, for example, cheating on a test. I want to cheat on a test to help my friend. So I'm going to get his attention because he's going to help me. Or I'm going to cheat on this test, so I'm going to get my friend's attention so that I can complete this test and get an A. That's something that I could bribe my friend. Oh, can I give you $15 and you can let me look off of your paper during math class? Those are the types of things that are considered bribery. If you make if you say to your child, if you go pick on your sister for 10 minutes, I'm going to give you we that's considered a bribe because you are presenting the behavior. It's a negative behavior. We don't want our children to get to perturb each other, to increase challenging behaviors. So that's the key difference here is we don't present the positive reinforcer before the behaviors, the acquisition skills have been taught, and we also don't kind of hang the carrot, so to speak, in front of the child in order for them to complete the task. Our reinforcer is presented after the behaviors are that we want to program are completed, and then and only then can they engage in that reinforcement. And again, I already talked about this one, but ABA is not just for children with autism. I use ABA with my partner. I use ABA with kids that I still teach privately for music. ABA is a technique that I use across my entire life. Okay, so PBS, so Positive Behavior Supports Corporation was founded about 17 years ago. And our mission is to develop and implement a responsive system that applies to the principles of positive behavior support and applied behavior analysis to meet the needs of individuals and families to produce quality of life changes that last. So we'll see in a few minutes how our services are a bit different than other folks. But we really want to change systems, and we want to make sure that folks get what they need out of our services, and that the systems that we implement last past when we're done with treatment and we've faded out. We want to make sure those systems continue after we're gone. Here's what we've already kind of talked about this, but we develop or enhance individuals' language skills and functional skills, and we decrease challenging behaviors. And these are just some examples. So non-compliance, not doing what you've asked your child to do, aggression, self-injury, elopement, so running away out of the house, property destruction, and anything ultimately that limits the individual's ability to develop skills and participate in their community or their school or in their family. So the practice of PBS is a subcategory of ABA that uses a set of research-based strategies used to increase quality of life. So yes, that's the name of our company as well, but it's a science that everyone uses. You'll often see PBS in schools or organizations to create system-wide changes. So your school, most of your public schools are going to have a positive behavior support plan in place in order to decrease challenging behaviors, both from the antecedents from before, kind of setting up the circumstances, and then systems in order to reinforce those behaviors that they want to see from all students. On the individual side of PBS, we focus on proactive strategies, so improvements toward quality of life. So we really look at what are the limitations that we have right now, and how can we program those in terms of the overall child. And we'll talk about person-centered planning in a second, but we look at the person and what their needs and wants are, their family and their caregivers, what their needs and wants are in terms of the individual that's being receiving services. And we put that all together, and we really think about what's going to be the most beneficial right now for this child or this individual that's receiving services. And we don't just take out a book and say, this is what we're doing because this is what ABA is, and we're check off all the boxes. We want to target what's going to be the most socially significant for that family and that individual. So what's going to be something that is really going to create some change, and it's not just a box that we check off that we have to check off. We incorporate client, caregiver, and stakeholder preferences. So we ask the individual and their caregivers what's more important to them. If they have the ability to communicate that, we involve them as much as possible within the intervention process and the assessment process. And then goals within the natural communities of support. So we try to make sure that we program those contingencies that are going to be able to last. So we want to make sure that we're not, using unnatural reinforcers when possible. And if we do have to use contrived reinforcers, so things that aren't available in the natural environment, then we program for how we're going to fade those things out so that they will be reinforced by just social praise or social attention, which is the most common form of natural contingencies. There's a lot of research and practice in PBS in terms of the literature, and it seems like a melding of practices, but it's more likely that ABA is adopting things that make PBS special. So you'll see a lot more overlap of, okay, is ABA ABA PBS or PBS ABA. So you'll see that a lot more these days. And there's several major movements that you're probably all familiar with that pull directly from PBS literature, including DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, using flexible interventions and stakeholder preferences, compassionate approaches to behavior analysis, so reduction of evocative interventions, refraining from using extinction and assent-based care. Basically, just we try to make the strategies as natural as possible. We don't want to really contrive things and do things that might cause children or the individual to be in stress, under duress, or in a situation where they might engage in challenging behaviors, and we just ignore those behaviors. We try as much as possible not to do those things. And then we try to make sure we have assent from that individual, not just consent. And then trauma-informed care and trauma-assumed care. This is also another movement that's been in everybody's ear lately. So this care accounts for unique individual and socially significant concerns that are related to application of treatment. And so taking things that the individuals have experienced before, making sure that we are including those into the behavior plan, both of preventing behaviors from occurring, and then using consequences that are centered around and avoid some of the trauma that might have been experienced in the past. So in-home ABA. So we do in-home ABA, which is different than a lot of companies in Indiana. We don't have clinics. We only provide services in-home, sometimes in schools, or a lot of times in schools, and community-based settings like churches and stores, or some children or some adults that have work-based assistance will have ABA at their job. These are just some places that we go. That's not as common in Indiana, from what I understand. Interventions are delivered in the environments in which the skills and behavior change are needed, and with natural routines. So yes, we're gonna do some repetition, and we're going to make sure that things happen over and over again so that the learner can learn those things, but we're going to try to make them occur within the natural scope of the day, or contrive the situation so that we have more repetition throughout the day for those skills so that they can learn. The skills are in the natural environment. So when we fade out our services, our teaching, we hope and we program so that they continue to occur. And it's a lot easier than taking a child's from a clinic-based setting and then taking them into the natural routine in the home setting. And then, it's just a whole extra layer that you have to program for. And some kids even need to be taught again how to do things in the home because they're so used to doing things in this one setting. And as we know, with like repetitive and restrictive behaviors, some individuals are really stringent on where they will engage in certain skills, or with whom they engage in certain skills. So you might have a child in a clinic that the BCBA says, oh, they can do this, 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 and this, and you're like, I have never seen him do that, or never seen her do that. It's often times because they know that their RBT and their BCBA do this, but mom doesn't do this. So we try to make sure that parents are involved a lot more in treatment than a traditional clinic model. It's a more individualized approach. So we talked about person-centered planning. So it's really involving the caregivers and the individual in the process, taking their preferences and their needs and their goals for their life into consideration. Functional skills are established and more readily generalized. I just talked about this. So generalization is basically, I'm in another environment, I'm not just in the clinic. I'm not just in the living room at home. I'm also in the kitchen. I'm outside. I'm in the grocery store. I'm at church. We try to make sure that we program our services across all of these areas and with multiple people. So with mom, with dad, with grandma, with Pastor Jim, with his making sure that the school folks know what we're doing so that they can implement the same programming at school or same strategies. And then maintained is just maintained across time. So after we fade out, are they still going to be able to do this skill? Families become empowered to support their children, reducing the need for professional assistance. We just talked about this. We want to try to get ourselves, make ourselves not have jobs is what our goal is. Typically, we want to make sure that we are out of there as quickly as possible so that the child can function as independently as they are able to, and parents are able to support those needs rather than trained staff. And then it allows for a tiered service delivery model, which services can be matched to the child and family. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. The PBS process, we first come in and do an assessment. So we use person-centered planning and a battery of assessments based on the individual's needs and desires and the caregivers. And then we really take the assessment process to learn the ins and outs of this individual. What medications do they take? What's their daily routine? Where do they go? What do they do? What kinds of things do they like? Do they like sports? Do they like My Little Pony? Do they like Bluey? Those types of things are incorporated into the plan. And this allows for caregivers to contribute to goals and when appropriate, implementation of treatment, which will be in the next section. Again, we make sure that we include individuals' preferences and input whenever possible and appropriate. Okay, this is kind of just our timeline. I'm not going to go through every single bullet point here, but basically we complete a direct assessment and a write-up. We have our senior behavior analyst review. We submit to insurance for ongoing services, and then we get the review or the approval, and we work with insurance to make sure that that happens as quickly as possible. We try to get services going within 30 days of the scheduled assessment. That's our goal, to get folks into treatment as quickly as we can. Okay. And then the next part of the process after the assessment is treatment. So again, we use natural environment training throughout a variety of contexts and hopefully within the regular everyday routine. So hopefully we're not brushing the teeth right when we get home from school, unless that's the natural routine and that's how kids normally do it. We try to make sure that we're incorporating ourselves and our interventions into the natural day-to-day. Caregiver training, we meet caregivers wherever you are. So if you don't know anything about ABA, then we start from what you want to learn and what's most important to you to learn about ABA or managing challenging behaviors. And we don't have like I said, a cookie cutter curriculum for parents that we're going to do exactly this thing in exactly this order. So if you know a lot about ABA, I have had parents in the past that have been RBTs and BCBAs. So I'm like, okay, we're going to approach this way differently. So we kind of look at what your skills are and go from there. We try to provide the skills to empower yourselves and also for you to teach other folks that are surrounding that individual's life how to manage challenging behaviors, how to reinforce, how to prompt and teach. And then with the treatment process, we are in homes, we're in communities, we are with you, we are with parents, and it's really critical that we do this part because it's again, we want to put ourselves out of the job as quickly as possible so that you guys are able to manage and the individual is able to manage his or her challenging behaviors. And then the in-home process is different because, you're going to be able to see treatment happening. So it's a lot more clear what we're doing, and the communication is a lot more open in terms of you asking questions, parents asking questions, caregivers asking questions, and getting training on how to implement and respond to behaviors. Okay, so I'm not going to go through everything here, but I'm a BCBA, and I have a master's degree, and I have done supervised hours before I got certified and took my exam. I conduct the assessments, I write the intervention plans, I provide supervision of RBTs, registered behavior technicians, and I conduct parent caregiver training. This is the tiered system that we were talking about earlier. So the tiered system also includes a registered behavior technician. They've had typically 40 hours of training in applied behavior analysis. They've taken an exam and they've had a competency series with the BCBA before they take that exam. And they implement the written behavior plan from the BCBA. And the BCBA supervises this person, typically between 10 and 20% of the direct care hours that the RBT will be working. So the BCBA will be supervising 10 to 20% of those sessions. Okay, so going into community-based interventions, this is always a struggle, and I'm sure everyone has at least seen a child in this situation where the mom's like, oh, okay, what do I do now? And so we're going to talk about a couple of those things that are going to hopefully help you to manage and prevent challenging behaviors from occurring in community settings, because we all know that it's not the most fun thing to be in the middle of the store and having to, get your child off of the floor, or, if he or she is a screamer. And then we want to make sure that they're not doing that. And we want to make sure that we're providing strategies to parents that are easily accessible, that you can use from day to day. So these preference assessments. So we conduct regular preference assessments to identify effective reinforcers. We use these preferred items to or activities to reinforce positive behaviors in community settings. So preference assessments are done. So for example, sorry, doing the application here. If a child enjoys playing with a specific toy, you're going to bring the toy along to community outings, reinforce desired behaviors, such as staying close to the caregiver or following directions. Typically, you'll have a set of rules that you're implementing in the community-based setting. It could be 2 to 3 rules. Just looking at what are the behaviors that are occurring, and how can I put the rules in place, which we'll talk about rules in a few minutes, but in order for them to actually maintain those rules while we're out at target. So for example, staying close to a caregiver, that could be a rule. Stay close to mom, stay close to dad, and follow directions. Follow directions the first time, or make sure you're looking at mom when mom's talking. Those types of things will be pretty simple things for the child to remember. And you might have like a visual that has each one of those rules so the child remembers the rules. But ultimately, we're going to provide the reinforcement whenever they engage in these rule conforming behaviors. So just have these couple problems that are typically encountered with that preference assessments help to mitigate. So the reinforcer doesn't work. So I get this a lot from parents. Well, I gave him the Oreos, but he only did it one time, and then the reinforcer stopped working. Okay, so there's different ways for us to implement the preference, the reinforcer, to deliver the reinforcer. So we need to make sure, okay, how many Oreos did he get? Did you actually wait until he was finished engaging in the rules? How often are you giving Oreos outside of the going to Target? Are you giving them, he had them for lunch and he had them for snack this afternoon? Well, they're not going to be as valuable to him if he's already had them twice during the day. So there's lots of there's lots of elements that will affect the quality of reinforcer and how it actually works. The other thing about the reinforcer doesn't work is, yes, you know your kiddos, and your staff probably knows a lot about your kiddos if you have ABA right now. But our preferences change constantly, especially if you have a little guy or gal that doesn't have vocal verbal speech, or doesn't have a consistent method of communication. We have to constantly probe and see which of these is actually reinforcing the child. So you want to look at, I taught him this skill and I reinforced it with this. And every time he does that skill now, I reinforce him, and he's beginning to do it on his own, and he's beginning to do it without me having to help him, with hand over hand prompting, or without me waiting for 10 seconds before he answers me. If those things are increasing, if you're able to see an increase in those skills, then that means that the thing is reinforcing that you're provided for him. If those things are not growing, it's probably because the thing isn't actually reinforcing what the child wants. So we need to ask, or present items, and really delve in to see what the child actually likes, so that we can program for reinforcement. And then the matching law problem is basically, we look at the value of the reinforcer. So when I was saying Oreos earlier, so Oreos are one of my favorite things in the world. I love Oreos. I can't have a batch of them, or I mean a bag of them here, because I would go through them very quickly. So but the point is, Oreos are really high up there in terms of my preferences, and I know they're going to be reinforcing, but I can only have Oreos whenever I've went to the gym all week, or I've stuck to my diet the whole week. And then I'll have a 6-pack of Oreos at the end of the week. Now, if I'm noticing that I'm not actually completing the behaviors that I want to increase, then it's clear that those Oreos have lost a little bit of their value. Okay, so we want to look at, is the child engaging in the behavior we want them to engage in? And the matching law is just basically, does the work that we're doing match what we're getting out of the work? Okay, so if you have a job that you don't like, then it's not going to be reinforcing for you to be at that job, right? So just another example of that. So it's got to match. It's got to be something super strong if it's a really hard skill. If it's an easy skill, then we may just need a couple grapes or something else that's not quite as powerful as that 6-pack of Oreos. So we look at those things in terms of the reinforcement, but first we have to see, are these things actually reinforcing to them? Are they actually preferred items? So, for example, parents working with a teenager in a community-based job training program, and to motivate the teenager to complete tasks like organizing shelves, cleaning up, the therapist conducts a preference assessment, and they discover a teenager is highly motivated by time on their phone, which is obvious. But as a result, the therapist uses 5 minutes of phone time as a reinforcer for every 30 minutes of completed work. So in this case, they've done the preference assessment, and they've either asked this teenager, what's your top choice, what's your second choice, what's your third choice, or they've actually presented the items in front of them, like you see in this visual. Okay, the apple, the orange, and the banana, which one would the child take first? Well, that's probably going to be the most reinforcing item out of those 3 items. And so there's lots of different ways for preference assessments, for you to complete preference assessments. And this is going to be kind of the first step when you're going to the community, identifying a preferred item that you know is going to get him or her through that outing without challenging behaviors, and adhering to the rules that you set for that outing. And this is probably the most important element of what I'm going to tell you today, is make sure that preferences are reinforcing. Make sure the child actually likes what you think they like, because preferences change constantly. Okay, I just have a link here to a bunch of different preference assessments. There's all kinds of preference assessments. I'm not going to go through them, but there are checklists, there are questionnaires, because oftentimes you forget, oh, there's this whole set of stuff that I completely forgot that he probably likes, like sensory-based items or foods, activities, adult attention or peer attention. All of those things can be preferences, and we want to make sure we're assessing those properly. Okay, the second strategy we're going to talk about is social stories and visual supports or reminders. So you see on the right here is just an example of what this is the beginning of a social story, but social stories and visual supports are typically tailored to the individual's needs, and they can guide behavior to set expectations for the community environment. So when you're going to a grocery store, you might have a grocery store social story, going to the park, going to a restaurant. Before entering the challenging setting, you'll take the story, you'll review it with the child, and then you'll practice those if you can, if it makes sense and it's feasible to practice going through the rules. Show me what listening to mom looks like, or turning your head, looking at mom when she's talking. Those things are a key element of providing social stories. You can't just say, okay, here's the social story, go. You read the social story, why aren't you doing it? We have to incorporate that practice element before we go into the setting. And then when you get to when you're going to the setting, you can then just review the plan, review the story. And that should kind of key them in. Oh yeah, we practiced this when I was at home. Now I know I can use these strategies, and this is my reminder, is this story. You could also have supports like schedules, task sequences, or cue cards to provide ongoing prompts during the activity. So if you have something on your phone that just, like, for example, in this picture, there's a book, there's 2 cards, there's a computer, and there's a guy reading. So whatever this is, we could have the book. The book means you're going to be reading. Or the computer means that you are going to use, good manners, or whatever the associated behavior is. You could just present that card and say, okay, remember, what is a rule for computer? And then go over the rule if an infraction takes place. It just makes it easier for kiddos to remember, because we know kids with autism are visual learners. So example is a child with autism is preparing for their visit to the dentist, and the parent creates a social story with pictures and simple text that walk through each step of the visit. Entering the office, sitting in the waiting room, meeting the dentist, opening their mouth for an examination, getting a sticker at the end. So the child reviews the story multiple times before the visit, reducing anxiety to help them understand what to expect. And again, I would add in this, we practiced our rules, and we practiced what it's going to be like. So even just general, like, pretend play, and practicing, maybe mom's the dentist and dad is the dad, and you're practicing going to the dentist. You review those rules in the social story, and then when you actually go into the dentist, you're reviewing that story again right before you go in, or right when you get into the office. These are just a couple of resources that I found really helpful. Nuclei it's a newer AI-based tool, and it actually incorporates the child's name, the child's how the child looks, how the names of their parent or mom and dad, and you can customize it completely to make the characters look similar to what you look like in an illustrated form. So I thought that was a really cool element that I had not seen before. And then the stories can incorporate the child's preferences, which is something really key to do to make sure the child's engaged in the story. So if they like Power Rangers, we're going to make sure the word Power Rangers is in the story. So this is a great tool. It's not free, but I think you can have a trial, and then there is a free version of it that doesn't have all the customizations that I was just talking about, but it's a really neat resource that makes things really easy to operate, easy to create social stories, and it creates a social story how it should be structured. There's a certain structure that social stories need, and it has that built-in structure. So it's a great resource. Magic AI is or Magic School AI is another newer tool that's used by lots of school districts, but it also has a social stories builder within the app. There is a free version of that as well. And then Yes Chat is another generator that's a little bit more low key, and it's completely free. But it's just basically connected to Chat GPT, and it generates stories based on what you ask. Okay, our next strategy is environmental modifications. In ABA and PBS, we adjust the environment to minimize triggers to make it more conducive to positive behavior. This might include choosing quieter times for community outings. So I know like my local Target has like sensory friendly hour. It's early in the morning. I know that when I was at Six Flags a couple weeks ago, I saw that there was like an area for that was sensory friendly, that didn't have all of the noise, and it was kind of in a center of the park where there was not as many food stations and rides and games and other things that might trigger challenging behaviors. So I know you guys all probably know about all these, but more and more folks are cognizant. More and more companies out there are more cognizant of autism, and they're creating these accommodations and to help you guys as parents to shop at their store. So, but you can also just choose a time where you're like, okay, nobody's going to be there at 9 p.m. or call your local store and ask, okay, what are the busiest times? An application is, for example, an individual sensitive to noise, plans visits during less busy hours, use noise canceling headphones or something, or earplugs to block out some of that noise. Those are all things within the environment that you can change, or you can plan for, to decrease the possibility that your child might engage in challenging behaviors. And the example here is a family's planning a trip to an amusement park with their child and has sensory sensitivities. To make the experience more comfortable, they plan to visit the park during off-peak hours, bring noise canceling headphones, and create a quiet space in the stroller with a blanket and their favorite toys. They also identify quiet spots in park where the child can take breaks if needed. So I was just talking about, but this is something that most of you probably already do, but I just wanted to put it on here because there's other things that you might not even think about that are available in the community that are probably readily available. The information is readily available on companies' websites. Okay. So there is a website called Sensory Friendly Solutions. It is a subscription-based service. So it uses AI to suggest sensory friendly events and locations in your area based on your child's sensory profile. And then this is really cool. I didn't know this until I was doing research for this presentation, but Google Maps has an AI enhanced feature that predicts crowd levels, predicts noise levels, and peak times for various locations, helping you plan your outings during a quieter period of time or less busy period of time. I had no idea this existed, but it's a completely free feature that Google Maps has now. So definitely check that out. I thought it was pretty amazing. So yeah. Okay, our next strategy is rules. We talked about this a little bit earlier when we were talking about positive reinforcement and preference assessments, but with our rules, we establish clear, simple rules for behavior in community settings, making them very easy to understand and follow. And we want to reinforce these rules consistently. So we're not talking about 15, 20 rules. We're talking about 3 to 5 super simple rules that are going to be key, that are going to be, basically avoid the challenging behaviors that occur. So for an application is for before entering a community space, review a few key rules with the individual, such as use indoor voices or stay with me. Use these visuals or role playing to reinforce these rules in a fun, engaging way. And so these can be incorporated into your social stories and you're in making sure your preference assessment is there to be able to reinforce them appropriately. The don't do X problem. So lots of folks, and I'm guilty of this as well sometimes, and I have to kind of go back and think, okay, how can I word this differently? But we don't want to have rules. We don't want to have rules that are don't do this. So don't use foul language. Don't scream in the store, or don't ask for anything. Those are things we don't want to do. So I'm giving you a rule that's a don't rule for the don't problem. So for example, using indoor voices. Okay, my child screams all the time. So you're going to use indoor voices. You're going to practice what an indoor voice looks like in your home, and you're going to do a pretend play situation where you go to another room or you go to another house and you pretend like that is the store and you're using the indoor voices, or you're going to go to another room and pretend that that's the store, that's the target. You're gonna practice that over time, and then stay with me. So if your child is an eloper, they run off or they wander, keeping them on a stay with me, using a stay with me rule instead of don't leave my side or don't get out of the cart. Those types of things, we don't want to say the don't because we want to basically provide it's an antecedent strategy to tell them what they have to do. So if you say, don't scream, that doesn't give them the behavior that they should do. So that use indoor voices instead of don't scream. Stay with me instead of don't run away. Because don't run away gives them a lot more opportunities to do other things. They can crawl away. They can, headstand away. They can do back handsprings away. But so those are all different ways that kids kind of circumvent rules. And we do too. The example here is when heading to community playground, you establish a few simple rules for your children. So stay inside the fence, take turns on the slide, use kind words. And before you leave the house, you review the rules with the children, making sure they understand them and remember them. And to encourage compliance, you praise them when they follow the rules, and you offer small little rewards like stickers, helping them learn and follow expectations of the community. So again, like I was talking about before, you can use visuals, have just a couple pictures that you have from your social story that you've used or whatever you've used to teach the child, and just have that on your phone and say, okay, remember remember the picture of the man with the man beside his, or the boy beside his mom. What does that mean? Oh, that means I need to stay with mom. And just reminding, that's a good way to prompt instead of just telling them over and over and over again. Because remember, our kiddos with autism are more visual, and they need that permanency of that visual instead of the audio, because you'll have to repeat yourself. Not even just children with autism, adults and typically developing children also could use a visual prompt or two at times. I myself use a lot of visual prompts for myself, and I have my rules that I have to use for my workouts and or for my diet written down on my fridge, for example. Okay, so AI can provide some reminders and prompts to help children remember and follow the rules. So there's ways to program. You can set alarms on your phone for every 15 minutes to check in. Am I following the rules? Is your child following the rules every 15 minutes? I'm going to go through all my rules, and if you've been adhering to your rules, then you get whatever the reinforcer is at the end of that 15 minutes. It might need to be 5 minutes when you first start a program like this. It might need to be 10 minutes. There are apps out there that will just prompt you to do stuff. So I had a little wearable pendant on that I was doing a lot of slouching on my computer, and I had a little pendant that would prompt me when it felt that I was slouching. It would give me a little buzz, and I would just have to sit back up. It wasn't aversive. It was just something that a little prompt that I needed in order to get back on track in terms of my posture. Um, uh, so the example here, smartwatch vibrates and displays a reminder when the child is about to wander too far. So using GPS, if the child is wandering too far, the smartphone will ding and say, oh, you got to move back to or it'll ding and an alert will come up that you're too far away from mom. Okay, then they know to go back. Or when it's time to use indoor voice, there's apps that will monitor your volume level, and you can review that every 15 minutes. Have you been using indoor voice? Let's look on let's look on the app and see how quiet you are or how loud you are. It just helps kiddos be, helps them ultimately self-regulate by using a device versus your voice, because ultimately we all respond to our phones when there's a prompt. We all respond whether there's an email, there's a text, those types of things. That's a skill that's going to be naturally in the environment for everybody. So why not get them used to it if they have the ability to do that? Then it's a great tool. Okay. Okay, so this is another little section. So I had been experimenting with ChatGPT a little bit, which I'm sure you're all familiar with at this point. But I kind of created some scripts. So my child has trouble when they are doing this and when we are in this setting. So my child has trouble staying with me when we're at Target. Can you create 3 to 5 rules for him for our outing in the community today? And ChatGPT created those 3 to 5 rules. They were positive. They were really easy to understand. You can also add things in like my child is 6 years old, or my child is 15 years old, but has limited language skills. So those or doesn't read. How would you create that? And ask a ChatGPT, how would you create my rules? Or can you give me some ideas on how to create rules? Of course, if you have a BCBA, that person can probably help easier than you trying to figure out how to get the right prompt in ChatGPT. But just some examples of ways you can kind of look for things that can help in the meantime. You can also put into ChatGPT the behaviors that are happening, the child's preferences and typical challenges faced during outings, and it can suggest those rules. Okay, this is the last strategy. It's our token system. So everybody knows what this is. A token economy system is basically you get something for working, and then you get to exchange that later for reward. So I get money for working, and I have money, and I take that to Best Buy, and I buy all the electronics that I love. So that's a token economy system. It's a system that we all use for all of our life. So it's not something that's really, some folks are like, oh, I don't want to do that because I don't want them to get used to it. Well, everyone's going to get used to it because that's the way the world works. That's the way our economy works. So it's okay. It's just going to transition to a different form when they get older. That's it. For example, in a commuting outing, an individual might earn a token for waiting patiently in line. After accumulating 5 tokens or so, they exchange the 5 tokens for a snack or candy, or adult attention, or 5 minutes with my preferred friend who's in another class, etc. So an example, you notice your child struggles to sit still during family dinners. So you're at, I'm trying to think of an Indiana restaurant that's like local. You're at Culver's. Okay, so you're at Culver's and he has trouble because he really likes to play with the soda machine. So to help him develop a skill to sit still during Culver's outings, you introduce a token system at home, or at Culver's, I should say. For every 5 minutes they sit quietly at the table, they earn a token. And once they've collected, 15 tokens, they can trade that in. Okay, you've got 20 tokens tonight. What kind of frozen custard do you want? You get an extra topping for every, five tokens you got. So these are kind of fun and to implement. You got to be consistent with it. You got to make sure that you are actually providing the terminal reinforcer, the thing that they wanted. If they earned enough tokens for it. If not, then they just try again next time, but they have that place to start. I had 10 tokens. Now this time, next time I go, I only need 10 more tokens to get my custard with, Butterfinger, Reese's, and Cardinal. So those are some ways you can kind of incorporate the token system out in the community settings. These are just some examples of token systems, and I try to create. I tried to make a list of some free apps there, and then some one for this Habitica is more geared towards individuals that can read and write and have less complex needs than the other two. The other two are pretty simple, straightforward. You have a couple boxes. The child gets to pick which token they want to use, and they get to pick the terminal reinforcer, what they get to work for. And then you provide the tokens for them engaging in the correct behaviors. Habitica, it has a bunch of habits. So am I eating my vegetables? Am I reading the book that I'm assigned? Am I doing my homework? It's got a little bit more complex behaviors, but it's a really cool app. Okay, and that is it. I'm right on time. If this is my contact information, this is my direct cell or my work cell, and then this is Shannon O'Leary's work cell. And then if you want to apply for our services, you can contact us. Right now, our website's a little funky, doing some funky stuff today. So hopefully everything will be resolved tomorrow, but you can go to our website to find more information. Or if you want to apply for services, it's a pretty straightforward process, but you can always call me or Shannon to walk you through the process if you're having trouble or if the website's not working for you. Definitely give us a call at any time, and we're happy to support and happy to provide any resources, even if we aren't going to provide services for you. If you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And
Thank you so much, Josh.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Are there any questions that anyone has for Josh right now? You can put in the chat or just unmute and ask your questions. And we're also recording this webinar. So after we're done with this, I'll get the recording and email it to everybody, probably by tomorrow, hopefully. So you'll have that, and then we'll also put it on our website and post it on our social media and our newsletter. Any questions right now? Actually, a lot of the stuff that you talked about, Josh, is kind of what we do with my youngest daughter on the spectrum. I really liked the points of in the very beginning when you were talking about doing in-home therapy. That really was the turning point for us with our daughter. When we started, because she started out in center and then COVID hit, and then we moved everything to in-home, and my husband and I were more involved than we ever were when she was center based. And she's made some really good strides. She's 14 now, but it was just right at that age where she was starting to be more independent. We needed more help at home. And now my husband and I, she's at school now. We haven't been in ABA for the past couple of years, but my husband and I are still implementing a lot of the strategies that we had when we did have ABA support. So it really does help a lot.
That's great. Great to hear.
Hi, and this is Shannon O'Leary. I was on the slide. I'm the clinical director. Just want to be clear too that, there is definitely a place for clinic-based services, but we are finding that a lot of times there's like discharge at a certain age or after a curricular assessment has been completed. And so we really like to be friends with other providers and within clinic providers. So that way we can really work, like you said, moving from the clinic to in-home to help generalize some of those skills, that maybe they need center-based to really have more contrived settings and learn things in more of a controlled environment. But we eventually, the goal would be to have the experience you did where they're, making and hitting goals within that setting. And then we can generalize it to home, to school, to the store, to, you and your family members. So that, that's the point we just really wanted to make, is that we really focus on empowering caregivers to implement what we do and fade out.
Yeah, I completely agree. It was very helpful to have that. Any other questions for Josh before we go? All right. Well, again, Josh, thank you so much for your time tonight. Everyone else, thank you so much for attending this webinar. We hope you found some information that you were looking for. And we hope everyone has a good night. Thank you so much.
Good night.